Roe v. Wade was overturned. It didn't make abortion illegal. It put it back into the hands of the state government. And some of those states, like Vermont has no limitation on the age the preborn child can be aborted. The excuses and the levels of justification for the unjustifiable. If you stand for life, it is considered hateful. If you stand for truth, it is considered hateful. We are now persecuting what is good and what is innocent and excusing what is evil and what is bad. The life of a preborn child deserves to be protected. And I am going to challenge all of my sisters to start using your voice. Well, welcome to the Fight for Female podcast. Today I am joined with my daughter-in-law, Christian, who is pregnant. How far along are you now?
Currently at the taping of this, 5 months.
What's really punctuating this moment for me is yesterday, we just had the incredible privilege of welcoming our 8th grandchild. Mr. Arthur was born, much wanted, much anticipated birth. While we were taping yesterday, Jess was laboring. We were like, are you having the baby yet? And this beautiful baby boy, 9 pounds, 3 ounces, welcome into our world.
42 weeks. He was baking.
I know. He was like, I am going to just chub up inside of here.
Yes.
But you know what, Christian, at the same time, we came out of the taping. John and I are so filled with joy about this baby. And I read something. Do you want to share what we just saw happen in, I don't even want to say the judicial court because it makes it sound like it has some kind of justice involved. Yeah. But what happened? There were some pro-life advocates who were sentenced yesterday. And I really feel like it's important that people know about this.
Yeah, it's unfortunate we have to read it, but I think it is, like you said, important that we do. So it says 30-year-old pro-life activist Lauren Handy has just been sentenced to 57 months.
Okay,
not
so wait,
days.
57 months is almost how long?
Almost 5 years.
Almost 5 years, okay?
Crazy. In federal prison for handing roses and resources to women at an abortion facility. Meanwhile, abortionists who dismember and kill children walk free.
Okay, so let's talk about that.
Yeah.
So we have a young girl who is going to enter prison at 30 years of age. She's going to come out at 35 for handing out roses and resources that I'm sure would have given people the option of making other choices than abortion. And yet, you can rape a child.
Class C felony, the maximum you can get fined for that is $10,000, and you're looking at 3 to maybe 10 years.
And a lot of times they have the charges dismissed. I mean, we just saw there's sexual assault cases where people serve less than a year in prison. And now we have somebody passing out roses, does not do damage to anybody, passes out roses. And they also had a 69-year-old man. If you go back, there was a 69-year-old man. And how long was he sentenced for? I believe it's in the same group. And we're drawing on information from Live Action. We love and support Lila Rose and Live Action. We love what they do.
69-year-old pro-life activist John Henshaw, who held a career serving the homeless, the addicted and disabled, was just sentenced to 21 months, so that's almost 2 years, in federal prison for his peaceful work saving lives from DC late-term abortionists.
Yes,
but that person walks free.
Yes, and I don't know if you know that. I believe it was 5 little bodies were found in the dumpster, dismembered and unnamed, and they were late-term abortions. They were illegally done, late-term abortions, hidden away, and these were people that protested that. And right now, I personally find myself questioning the integrity of the judges in the United States of America, that they could actually sentence a young woman to almost 5 years in prison and a 69-year-old man to almost 2 years in prison for peaceful protests, in light of the fact that these are not hardened criminals, these are not repeat offenders, these are not people that have stolen things, killed people, been doing sexual assault, and yet this is where we've come from, where we are persecuting what is good and what is innocent and excusing what is evil and what is bad. And you and I just saw a video not long ago. This is very upsetting, of a trans woman, which, in case you're concerned or confused, that means a man. Looks like a very strong black man in a blonde wig who ran over how old was this man?
I believe he was in the 60s.
A man in his 60s, ran him over, backed over him again, jumped out of the car.
I believe assaulted him.
Possibly sexually assaulted him and stabbed him 9 times. And while this is going on, there are people watching. Nobody interferes. Nobody calls the police at the very beginning of it, as far as we know.
Or shouts, stop.
Yeah, nobody. The guy actually is interacting with the witnesses as he tries to get into another car where he can't escape. And he just decides, okay, I'm just going to leap over this body that I just stabbed 9 times. And yeah, that's it. And, these kind of things are being put on social media. They might out just a little bit of the violence. But as you know, when we did the trailer for the Fight for Female podcast, I don't know if any of you have gone to YouTube, but if you go to YouTube.
Not, shameless plug. Do it right now.
Yes, do it right now. If you go to YouTube, you can see that just the trailer that features things that everybody else puts on their social media, just the trailer is put as sensitivity. You might not want to watch this. Because why? Because it's considered hateful if you stand for life. It is considered hateful if you stand for truth. It is considered hateful if you don't allow people to make excuses. Because, somewhere along that line, that person's going to get caught and there's going to be like, oh, well, you know what? It's just hard on them because he's a trans woman and people don't really believe that person is. I don't even know what's going on right now.
Right.
But the excuses and the levels of justification for the unjustifiable is it's so extreme right now. Right. The crazy thing is, Christian, most states have, they've taken back their power to make the ruling. When Roe v. Wade was overturned, it didn't make abortion illegal. It put it back into the hands of the state government. Yeah. And some of those states, like Vermont has no limitation on the age of the child or the preborn child can be aborted. And there's talk in some states where the parents can decide after the child is born whether they want to keep the child or not. And I do believe there was talk around that in California. And so here's where we are. We've gone from, heartbeat to, first and second trimester, to partial birth abortions, to all the way to birth abortions. And it was interesting. I watched an interview between Sage Steele and Robert Kennedy that was, running for president. And she asked him, at what point should women not be allowed to abort their babies? He was like, it's always a woman's choice, all the way up. And now they're trying to backpedal. His vice presidential candidate is trying to backpedal on that. But she pushed it a number of times. He was like, I believe it's always a woman's choice. It's always a woman's choice.
Well, I think that's the thing there. So going back to what you were saying earlier, our justice system isn't fully just for all parties. And if you take back the scale of, I'm on this side and I'm on this side, we should be on the side of justice. And that can't be divided and cut how we want to per circumstance. It should be, what is the ruling? And are we going to stick to that for all people, for the betterment of our people? And if we're saying, I just think men especially are scared to feel like they're a bigot or they're toxic masculinity. So it's like, I don't have a say. It's just the woman's choice. No, you have a say.
You're the father of that child.
Yes. And if the men are not speaking up, like I love in Birth, they even say that the husband should be the advocate for the wife because she's doing something so intense. He needs to be in agreement with her, but verbally speaking, no, she wants this. No, she can do it. And if we're talking about for your child, no, you need to be a voice.
Well, I think men are getting
hands-off approach of, you can do whatever, you can do it. No. Like,
I think the men are getting very mixed signals right now. It's a protect us when we want you to protect us, but stay out of our life when we don't want you in our life. And so men don't know when to step in and say, hey, I want I want to be a father. Please don't kill that child. And now they're calling it forced birthing. Like women, the white patriarchy is forced birthing women. Like, so somehow it's always the woman that's the victim. It's never that a child, the life of a preborn child is being completely snuffed out. That child who is the most vulnerable, who deserves to be protected, we talk about it as though it's an embryo, as though it's a fetus, acting like it is not a preborn life, preborn child. It will never be anything but a child. And, having gone through a birthing process, having carried a child, as a mother, you have such an intimate awareness that it is alive. It's not alive when it draws its first breath. It is alive. It's not just moving around in your body because it's not alive. It is alive. I still can remember when I was pregnant with Addis, my firstborn, I was drinking some hot herbal tea. And you kind of get used to this being a table when you're pregnant. And I sat the glass kind of just down on my stomach, like, here's my table. And he kicked it like, what in the world? There was a temperature change right here. Like, get. So then I got a piece of ice and I started chasing him around. And I was like, this baby is real. This baby is feeling this hot, this cold, is interacting. And I can still remember that moment when I had Addison. It was a very complicated labor and delivery, and I'd had to get an epidural and I couldn't move. They gave Addison to John, and John's like bouncing Addison, like, he's crying, like, he doesn't like me, what's going on? And I said, oh, baby. And he heard my voice, and Addison turned and looked at me. And as soon as he heard my voice, he stopped crying. And there is this beautiful link, intimate link, unbreakable link between a mother and a child. And it is so God-woven. It is so beautiful. Science is now proving that women, when they carry their children, they actually carry that child's DNA in their body for the rest of their life. That's why moms will be like, no, don't beat me, don't spank, don't yell, because they feel that child. And it's God-woven for protection. And yet now we have a culture that is asking women to deny themselves, deny their God-given, God-woven, intimate longing to protect their child and to cast their child away.
And I think there's something to know about, there is, especially with how birth and pregnancy and motherhood is talked about today, there is so many women that approach becoming pregnant or even the idea with so much fear. But I have heard from so many people, it's like, well, when I had that baby and when I held it, I realized I'm stronger than I realized. One, because God is my strength. He equips us like innately, but also in that moment. But then when you set eyes and you're like, oh my gosh, I have felt you. I have known you. I couldn't put into words or vision how connected we were until this moment, but we always have been. And so I think when we embrace abortion and just say, well, they're scared and they don't know and they haven't seen it, like, it's not alive yet. There's a moment when it comes to a T and you're just like, oh, all my fears are subdued. Nothing else matters because this is worth it. But we're cutting that off prematurely by just saying, they're scared, do it. Just leave it. You can try again later. And I do feel like there has in the past, I wouldn't say it's so much the case now. There has in the past been largely more supportive at Planned Parenthood than maybe at your local church, where women felt like, but if I come to church and they find out I'm pregnant, I'll be covered in shame and everybody will look down on me. I do feel like there was some of that in the past, but I don't believe that is still the story. I remember this young girl told me that she had found herself pregnant and she went to Planned Parenthood and they sat down with her and they said, one day you're going to be an amazing mother, but it's not now. It's not now. You're not married. It's not now. And she said it was so peaceful. It seemed so helpful. You can just sweep this clump of cells away. It doesn't need to happen now. And then the day is going to come. But you know what? Christian, she found herself pregnant again in just a very short amount of time. And she went again and had another abortion. And then she found herself pregnant
again. And I'm trying to remember whether she connected with me after her second or her third pregnancy. But basically, she was super brilliant young woman, super self-sabotaging. And she was emailing me and I said, have you ever thought that maybe you're punishing yourself and maybe you're trying to replace that child that you lost, and then you go through this cycle of loss again and again. And I remember she became pregnant with her third baby, and she said, I tell you what, if you'll take my child, I will carry it full term and give birth to it. And she miscarried. And the doctor told her that her uterus was so scarred from all of the abortions that she had that he did not think she'd ever be able to carry a child full term. And see, they never tell these young girls that is a risk.
Informed consent, yeah.
Yeah. That
promise.
They just said one day you'll be an amazing mother. They never said maybe one day you'll never be a mother. Mm-hmm. And I can't remember if it was her third or her fourth abortion. Her fourth pregnancy that she found that. Mm-hmm. And she was, I think she was Ivy League educated, but living in a life of self-sabotage, where she was constantly pushing away the very things that she longed to draw near. She said she saw me on TV and she was listening to me talk, and she said that she was mocking me. She was like mocking. And she said, and then I began to listen to you. And she said, I found myself curled up on my bed and I said, I wish she was my mother. And there's a whole generation of young girls out there that, my heart breaks that no mother sat down with them and said, I will support a courageous decision to have a child. I had a beautiful young girl. When John and I were youth pastors, when John was a youth pastor and I was the work for free wife, our associate youth pastor, his wife, she told me the story of her sister got pregnant, and the parents said to her, we will just reconfigure your room. You can have this baby, and we'll do whatever you need to take care of this baby, to take care of you, and we'll support you on every level that you need to support it. They did everything for her, and because she was surrounded by love and support instead of shame and rejection and fear, it was just a matter of time before she met a man who not only loved her, but loved the baby that she'd given birth to, and she got married. And I feel like that is the kind of mindset we need to have, because to be a mother is to be a warrior, whether you are a single mother or whether you are a mother with a husband who loves and supports you. To be a mother is to be a warrior.
Yeah. And I think there has to be something said for, we can disagree is not the best word, but we can say, I probably should have come to this point to being pregnant a different way, but I'm not reversing that. Having an abortion doesn't take that away. It only furthers the pain that could have happened, no matter what that story is. And to me, that's one of the isolated cases where we think, oh, well, that probably shouldn't happen, but we're going to continue to shame you forever and ever. There's other things where we see so much more triumph more readily. And I would challenge us, like you're saying, as a group of believers to say, even what we were talking about in other episodes of, there is restoration, there is redemption, and especially that child knows nothing other than how you treat them and you love them. And I believe that they can even sense that in the womb.
Of course.
So it's like, okay, from today, I'm going to choose to love you. I'm going to choose to make the best out of our situation. I think one of the biggest proponents that does lead people, like you're saying, the Planned Parenthood conversation is, well, you don't have the resources right now. That baby needs X, Y, and Z to be able to thrive. But what I remember from my own childhood is the love I received, the care, the eye-to-eye contact, not how much money we had in the bank, not how many toys I had. They're actually saying less toys is better for your children developmentally now. But I think when we realize that there are options, there is information, there is, communities that help. Like even what we're saying of the beginning of this episode, the woman that handed out roses and resources. Sometimes people do need to know that they do have options, because when you get into something from a fear base, you're only seeing through one lens. And what's wild is with Roe v. Wade being overturned, that didn't stop abortions. It, like you said, it didn't make them illegal.
No.
We know just at Planned Parenthood, there's at least over 350,000 abortions performed per year. But yet, families waiting for adopting a child, it takes them 2 to 7 years.
It doesn't make any sense.
We see the disconnect there of, we call them unwanted pregnancies, but there are families wanting children, people, like you're saying, having miscarriages, suffering from endometriosis and infertility, not even knowing. Like, I wish we could get people in the room that have been suffering. We know so many sweet people that have suffered from infertility and miscarriages. I think if we could bridge the gap and say, you don't even know the privilege it is to carry a child. I don't get to know that. I would love to take care of that child. Like the one lady said, if you'll take care of it, I will carry it full term. Yeah. There's a bridge there that can be so connected. We don't have to turn to, people that just say, you can't do this, but maybe one day you can, and have these false promises of fear. We can connect. There are other ways. I know I would not be here today if it wasn't for the blessing of adoption. I have family members that have come into our family through adoption. So it is such a beautiful way. When we do things in community, we can actually solve each other's needs and find a tethering where there's only tearing apart, usually.
I love that.
So I know you have some people that you've partnered with.
And going back to what you said, if somebody doesn't know they have a choice, why is it wrong to tell them they have a choice? And so, if I was a frightened young girl and I was wrestling with the idea that I didn't want to have an abortion, but felt like I had no choice but to have an abortion, or if I was a frightened young girl in a state where it was illegal to have an abortion, and I knew I had to have the child, but I didn't feel like I had the resources to care for the child, I would want to know that I could be supported. And we've mentioned before that perhaps in the past, the church may not have known how to support women who found themselves with an unplanned pregnancy. But I know of 2 amazing organizations that do everything they can to come alongside the mothers and help them make courageous choices. Number 1, there is an incredible organization called Embrace Grace. I love Embrace Grace. And they come along church organizations and actually teach them how to do this for the young mothers. So this is something that's all over the United States. They have affiliates. I love it. And it was how it was birthed? A beautiful young girl found herself with an unwanted pregnancy. And she was heading in to have an abortion. And she just thought, there's got to be a better way. And she made the courageous choice, had her son, and thought, I need to make sure. And she actually had gotten pregnant by the guy that she ended up marrying later. And she said, I've got to find a way for other mothers to not make the poor choice that I almost made. So Embrace Grace, and then Live Action. Live Action, if you go to their website, Live Action has so many ways to connect you with the help that you need, and also to give you a little bit more information on what is involved, the risks of abortion, the procedure in and of itself. You need to have the information so that you can feel confident to make a decision. I watch so many of the Live Action reels where they show people, they're like, what would you consider yourself? Pro-life or pro-choice? They almost always say, I'm pro-choice, that's all on the women. Or I'm pro-choice. And then they show them the procedures, and the people are horrified. And they were like, I had no idea. Here's the thing. Maybe you're sitting out there, and maybe you're listening to Christian and I, and you've had an abortion. I just want you to know there is mercy, there is grace. Or maybe you're listening to us and you find yourself pregnant right now and wondering, can I tell my parents? Can I tell my friends? Do I have what I need? I'm going to tell you right now, God will come alongside. He will give you what you need, but you need to be courageous and ask for help. There are people out there waiting and watching to help you. So don't be afraid to ask for the help that you need. And then I want to also say to my Christian brothers and sisters, I find it so sad that the evangelicals are so inconsistent when it comes to their voice of being pro-life. My Catholic brothers and sisters, they are consistent about pro-life, but so much of the church is so afraid of being labeled as hateful that they will not stand up and use their voice for life and even speak out to some of the lies. And there's so many people, Christian, will actually say that miscarriages are abortions. They are not abortions. Miscarriages are not illegal anywhere to save a mother's life. Miscarriages, that is a treatment. If you have found yourself pregnant and you need a DNC, that is not an abortion. Do not listen to the lies. Do not listen to the people that just are pushing their agenda. So get informed, support organizations like Live Action, educate yourself. And I am going to challenge all of my sisters to start using your voice for life. This has been the Fight for Female podcast with Lisa Bevere. I hope you are finding ways to fight for female.